Welcome to the Probate Nation. My name is Richard Ruddy, host of the program. Probate is a process to transfer the title or ownership of probate assets to the beneficiaries of a deceased person. Not all assets are probate assets, and there are different types of probate, some simple, others more complicated. Like a journey on a slow-moving steam engine train, probate of an estate has a beginning, several stops along the way, and at the end of the trip, the balance of the probate assets remaining are delivered to the decedent's beneficiaries. Some probate train rides are short, while other probates seem to never end. When that probate train reaches the end of the trip, the executor has to know not only who is entitled to receive the remaining estate assets, but also must know how to reach that person to give them the money or the photo album or the family jewelry left to them by the decedent. Locating the beneficiaries of a bequest in a will or the heirs at law of an estate that has no will, and being able to prove they are who they claim to be, is the topic of our show tonight. To help educate us on how all this is accomplished, we are fortunate to have with us a senior executive from Heirs, a nationwide company that specializes in providing forensic genealogy services called A Better Way to the legal and trust professions. Suzanne Simpson has worked for Heirs for more than 20 years in various marketing and management positions and is now Vice President of Sales and Marketing. In her present position, Ms. Simpson works closely with legal and trust professionals both nationally and internationally to help them find missing heirs around the world. Please welcome Suzanne Simpson, Vice President of Heirs, who is joining us from afar in beautiful Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada. Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you, Richard.
You know, probate of an estate typically begins when someone has passed away and they have an estate that needs to be transferred to their beneficiaries. As we've mentioned in our opening comments, beneficiaries may be spelled out in a will that has been admitted to probate, but if there is no will, those beneficiaries may be spelled out in the state law called intestate succession, in which case the beneficiaries are called heirs at law. So for our discussion tonight, we're going to refer to heirs at law and beneficiaries all as heirs so that we can use a simple term. Sometimes it's easy to find the heirs and sometimes it is not. So Suzanne, what are some of the records and information you folks look for in a search to find an heir?
Well, some of the records we look for are vital records of life events, such as birth and death certificates, marriage and divorce records, military records, census records, naturalization records. And some of the other information we would look for or want to review would be things like the will of the decedent, information from interviews with family, obituaries, probate records, and any information provided by our client that might contain current contact information for any living individual.
So as you begin that search process, where is the first place that someone should look to locate records about a named or potential heirs?
Well, the first place that we would want to start with, and we would recommend someone to start, would be to speak with family and friends. We suggest this because they might have that documentation or data or any other information that might help you narrow down your search, and they might actually have the records needed as well.
So armed with the information from the family, with the decedent's will in hand or the state intestate law, there are many resources that are available to the public through the internet to continue the search. Tell us about some of those resources.
Sure. Well, there are many online resources, and the first that comes to mind is Ancestry.com, and this is the most well-known genealogical online resource for records, and we use this every day. They not only have American records, but literally millions of records from countries around the world, and it's an invaluable resource when conducting research into the generations.
And do you folks use these resources?
We do.
Now, are these resources, though, sufficient to resolve your search efforts typically?
Well, we often need to obtain records that aren't available online. So, yes, we do use all of these databases, but no, they're not sufficient. We need to get other types of documentation and records from government office, For example, when you're conducting heirs to find living people, you need to have the authority to be able to access certain documents. And so in addition to those online databases, we need to employ other resources and then use our expertise to correctly identify and prove and report all of these individuals. So it's a starting point on these online databases, but it's the experience that we have that we know how to put these puzzle pieces together.
So there are these I guess I would refer them as these commercial databases that I guess you turn to dig deeper as you do your due diligence as a professional search firm. Are these databases readily available to the public?
No. Some of the ones that we use, for example, LexisNexis has a few products, and you actually have to have authorization to use their products, and they are not accessible by the general public. You have to have a legal business purpose to be using that.
Okay. And are there any, I guess then there are some limitations then, are there some limitations with these databases that you have to deal with and dig further?
Absolutely. The problem with any database, whether it's a public one or a commercial one, is that they don't hold all of the information that you're going to need to find people. Even though those records are online, it may be that the information may not be all available there for you. The databases really are only as good as the information and the parameters that you input to look for someone. And for example, keep in mind that not only all the records, they may not have existed at the time, and they may not have been input into any database. So it really is about knowing where to look for what information. It's very important.
You know, so many decedents nowadays were born in other countries and then have immigrated to the United States, and frankly, some of their heirs may actually live outside of the USA. What are some of the challenges that you folks face with overseas search efforts?
Well, we have to do a lot of searching overseas, and there are challenges, as you said. We have, for example, taking into consideration different cultures when we're interviewing people, or thinking about history, for example, the wars and natural disasters. And we have to keep in mind things like geography, because borders have changed many times. And we also have to keep in mind that the responsiveness in requesting records. You know, it might take months at times to be able to access certain records that you've requested. And then I think the most obvious one is the language barrier.
Now, are there special databases that facilitate these types of searches?
Well, the best resource that we use is the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is the best source outside of the country of origin. They do have so many records that have been scanned from around the world, and they have specialists that represent each country who can assist you when you're needing to retrieve any records.
So is this special database something that's available to anybody?
It is, but you can either access it through FamilySearch.org. That's directly at the main Family History Library. But there's also, maybe even your local library might have what they call the Family History Center, which is like a branch of the main library in Utah. And if you access it through your local library, it might be that they offer this database for free. And I think they offer classes as well at times to help you use it. It's a great resource.
Excellent. Well, you gather all this information, it yields documents and it yields information, but in the probate of an estate or in an estate dispute, this information needs to be accurate, and this requires proof. Let's talk about the challenges your firm faces to prove or test the conclusions you come to when all the information has been collected from your various search sources.
Well, this is where our expertise comes in, because you can have all of this documentation, but it's how you put it all together and make your accurate report is what's important here. So what you have to do is we have to make sure that we compare all the records. We have to resolve any of the conflicts that we might have come across. We might fill in any gaps where there's any missing information. For example, names have changed. People have been given nicknames, spelling changes along the way. Date of birth can be different from one census record to the next. We need to go through all of that information and provide evidence that it's reliable, it's been skillfully correlated, interpreted, and documented with all the right proof. And that's what puts together our findings so that you'll know that the heirs are accounted for and proven with the right documentation.
Now, I know we talked about this in connection with preparing for the show, that there was a story you related to me about a lady whose birth date seemed to keep changing as she got 10, 20, 30 years older, and as they were trying to prove that. Can you relate that story to us?
That's right. Well, as the census is taken every 10 years, we were noticing each census record that we went back to, even though her husband was aging, she was actually losing a few years each time the census was reported. So everything isn't taken at face value. You really have to put that together in context with other documentation.
I think that's an excellent story. Has your firm been called upon, or do you guys get called upon to testify about your search conclusions?
Yes, we do. We provide testimony in court when needed. We can also do it via telephone. We do written depositions as well in an affidavit or declaration format. Whatever level of support is needed, we can provide it. That's
awesome. Well, let's turn to the industry that you're in, which is the heir search industry. This is large and it's growing. I think in no small part to the fact that we have an aging population and we're seeing more and more folks passing away, and these issues have to be sorted out. Is there an association that represents this industry?
Mm-hmm. I think the main one would be the Association of Professional Genealogists.
Okay, I know we're going to show on screen that there is a website, www.apgen.org, that folks can take a look at. Tell us what types of firms are actively involved in this heir search industry.
Sure. There are individual genealogists and local smaller genealogy firms who would also do traditional genealogy as well as the forensic genealogy that we do. Then there are those firms that are larger, more international, and they vary based on their fee structure. So there are those that are percentage-based firms, those that are combination of a percentage base as well as a set fee, and then there are those firms that are just a non-percentage based fee.
Okay, well let's talk about something that we and many of our clients see on a regular basis, and that is the unsolicited letter that arrives in the mail, letting us know that the firm has found some assets that we may be entitled to as an heir, and the firm wants to help us collect those assets. How did that firm know I might be an heir and then get my address?
Mm-hmm. Well, heir hunters, this is the percentage fee firm I was mentioning just a moment ago. What they do is they actually start monitoring the filing of probate cases where it appears that heirs are unknown or can't be located, and usually in larger valued estates. Then what they do is they actually independently search for those heirs, they locate them, and then you find this letter in your mailbox.
Interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about them, but let's continue this discussion though, because we're talking about estates, but you had mentioned in our discussion that the appointment of a conservator can also trigger action by these same firms. Can you talk about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, any public information can trigger this heir hunter involvement. And yes, we talked about somebody dying intestate, and percentage firms will take notice. But they also have agents scouring other locations that might have potential leads. So any tips that are coming in, We work for guardians and conservators that have actually seen this percentage firm involvement, and we actually see them now contacting us in advance of death to be prepared to avoid percentage firm involvement.
Now, I see that, as we've talked in many of our shows, executors and administrators and conservators have to be bonded, by the insurance company. Does the bonding process trigger these letters from firms such as the ones we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't specifically know whether it's exactly the bonding process that would do that, but if it's public information, then I think it could trigger this type of involvement. But I would certainly think that any court records in the wealthier jurisdictions might have this happen more frequently, and whether that's in Florida or California, New York, different states that might have this happen more often.
So the firms that employ these techniques and then contact the public, they're referred to as percentage fee firms. Explain what that means and what they charge for their services.
Certainly. They are referred to as percentage fee firms, and they've also been referred to as heir hunters. And essentially what they do is they are monitoring the probate records, finding estates that have known or unknown heirs. They start their search themselves, then they find the heir, present them with a contract without divulging any particulars on the estate, and they say to this potential heir, sign away a percentage of your inheritance as a finder fee. I will refer you to a lawyer who is waiting to represent you in the probate proceedings, and that way the heir hunter gets his fee, which would be a percentage of that person's inheritance. And the percentage, average percentage, can be a third of that share due.
So I want to refer our viewers to an article on percentage fee firms that Heir Search provided to us, and we'll show that link on screen. Given this discussion, I have to ask, is Heir Search a percentage fee firm?
Absolutely not. We are a non-percentage-based search firm.
I would want to relate, as we sort of conclude this discussion about percentage fee firms, that I can relate two very, very good cases where this came up. One involved a client who had passed away a number of years ago, and they come to get a letter in the mail saying that someone had found some assets for that deceased client that could pass on to the beneficiaries. And one of the children contacted me because they'd indicated that it was a pretty good, it didn't tell us how much it was. Every state, or most states, have what's called an unclaimed property statute, and they have a website you can go to. So what I told the client that they should do, and they asked me to do it, is I went online and identified that there was some unclaimed property for this particular person that apparently had not been probated and had been paid over to the state of Virginia. In the process, what we turned out was that the letter from the Heir Search, from the percentage fee firm, that said that they would help them get this money for a third. What I found out was that there was $35,000 sitting down in the Commonwealth of Virginia in Richmond, and that all we had to do was file a couple pieces of paper, and they turned the money over to the beneficiaries. If they had signed that letter, they would have given up a third of that money just for filing a couple pieces of paper. The same thing happened with my own family when they wrote a letter to us about some money in the state of Pennsylvania. And I went online again and checked and found that, lo and behold, there was a small amount of money that had been left behind. And we went ahead and claimed that directly by filing a couple pieces of paper. So just be cautious if you get those letters in the mail, that you take advantage of the public statutes for unclaimed property. Go online and take a look and see whether or not there might be some property there that you can go ahead and claim yourself on behalf of the estate. Let's turn to some common problems that are encountered in heir searches. Tell us about the types of issues or problems that you folks see in doing your heir searches, Suzanne?
Sure. I think some of the common problems that we encounter would be things like lifestyle issues, for example, homelessness. That's something that we see from time to time. We see things like estranged family members, adoption, information that might be told to us by some family members, and then we receive contradictory evidence from other family members. Also, we have another issue would be obtaining current verified contact information for living individuals. It's one thing to be searching for deceased individuals in documentation, but to actually verify living individuals, which is important in our search, those can be some challenges as well.
Now, is there anything, Suzanne, is there anything that folks can do in advance to avoid the need for the heir searches by their attorney and executor? Is preparing some sort of a memorandum, that compiles all this information helpful to you?
I think so. I think suggesting to talk to your family. I mean, sometimes people don't realize how much they really do know, and I think if you can compile this information and get as many records in advance, I think it would be really helpful, and you can really talk to your family members in providing these vital records, or even if there's any kind of information on any documentation, if I can just make that point, would be important to know in advance. So keep a list, ask your family, and have that in your state documents. Okay.
Someone spends a lifetime accumulating assets, and when they pass away, they surely want those assets to go to their loved ones, whomever that may be. Given the experiences of your firm in making that wish come true, can you share with our viewers some final thoughts and recommendations on the heir search process?
Well, following up with my last point on compiling the list of heirs and documentation is keeping this information up to date. So you might have addresses and contact information, and you might have done that a few years ago. It's good to redo this, revisit that to make sure that that information is current. People do move, things happen. If you can make sure that's up to date, that would be a great recommendation. And I think also, to echo what you also said as well, Richard, is that beware of these percentage fee solicitations. You don't need to rush into these. You can do some research yourself, and you don't need to sign in advance.
Well, Susan, I want to thank you, and all the folks at Heir Search for devoting the time to take part in this program and helping us prepare for the program. It's a great public service, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Richard. Thank you very much.
Without a doubt, probate can be complicated and confusing. But at the heart of the probate process is the ultimate goal of delivering the remaining estate assets to the intended beneficiaries or heirs at law of the deceased person. Determining who those fortunate folks are and being able to reach them is a critically important obligation of the executor. And you have to be certain you have the correct recipient before you turn over cash or property to that person. Our show tonight serves to highlight the importance of informing someone, whether it's your lawyer or a trusted family member or friend, just who are your relatives and who are your intended beneficiaries under the terms of your estate documents. Put it all down in writing with contact information for those folks as of that time who this will go a long way towards avoiding the need to hire a search firm to locate people. But if your executor still must do so, the information you've compiled will be a great start in their pursuit of those beneficiaries who, in our ever-mobile society, may have moved to another state or to another country, or sadly may have passed away too. This brings us to the conclusion of our show. I hope it was informative. Remember that replays of the show can be viewed on the Probate Nation website. On behalf of myself and the Probate Nation, thank you for visiting with us.